In this still life, we're going to be combining 4 shapes together and still practicing the relationship lines so we can get proper scale and proportion. So with those 4 pieces, we're going to make sure that we are going to be following the basic building steps that we have been practicing in the past. Remember, first you're going to begin with your focal point. Find a point or a place that is the most interesting, or any place that you're going to want to start. So for instance, this corner right here, or the top, or even that bottom corner down here. Remember, that first focal point gesture is going to determine the rest of your composition, or how you are going to frame your full still life into the frame of the drawing. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that corner of the milk carton or the cube my focal point right up here. Okay, and then remember, we're going to start off with some relationship lines. So I'm going to go ahead and find a line or an angle, okay, that's going to connect that point to somewhere over here where the cylinder is, or the pop can. Okay, so that's going to be my first. Remember, start off with your relationship line first. Then I'm going to do the same thing at the top. At the top, I'm going to start at this point here and draw a relationship line to that point, which is just a simple straight line. Then I'm going to draw my next relationship line to that point here. So I have 3 points. Okay, I'm going to draw my next relationship line there down to the bottom of that pop can or the cylinder that's laying horizontal. Okay, all right. And you can see I already have some anchors here that are placing the objects so I can get proper proportions or scale. Okay, after I've done that, okay, I can go ahead and begin gesturing. I like to start gesturing in my focal point. Remember to move swiftly. Make sure you're holding onto your medium properly. At this point here. Coming down here to the side. Okay, and that's pretty good for me. That's a good quick gesture. Remember, I want to make sure that I'm dispersing the energy throughout the drawing. Down here. Okay, I'm coming up here. I'll go ahead and do another relationship line, a line to the top of that pop can that splits that milk carton completely. I'm recognizing the space in between the 2 pop cans there and there. There is some negative space, so make sure to gesture. And remember, if your forms are going off the page, let them go off the page. Okay, moving on to this back form here. Again, I've made a point here. I'm going to put a line straight down, because if there's an imaginary line from the top of that bottle down, well, that creates a, that's a little bit on this side, okay, the right side of the pop can. So I'm going to move that over just a bit. Again, work through it. Don't worry about the smudging or any of that. Just let it become part of the drawing. Let that energy flow into it. Okay. Don't forget to step back, take a look. Okay. Now, as you can see, everything's very loosely drawn, but there's already a lot of energy. I mean, I'm liking this drawing already. Remember, like I've said before, that a good drawing could be finished at any point, at any stop in the journey. It should have its energy already, and that is achieved by movement, gesturing, observing your still life, breathing. Okay, and trying. That is it, trying. Make sure I get my ground in there. Now in the very back corner, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a little bit of that ground peeking through. Okay, it kind of crosses right there. Right, you can go ahead and draw it completely through your gesture drawing. It's going to give you that best curve. We'll erase all that later, no big deal. Okay, that's the gesture. Now I'm going back into the next step, which would be the carving. So, still carving now. And remember, I mean, sometimes what you need to do is switch in and out of both or of the steps. You know, whatever step you're at, you can always pause, add a little more charcoal, and then continue to find that edge. Now remember, I'm simplifying what I'm doing first, and then I can get the nice curves of the shampoo bottle. Well, I think it's very important to note that even though you can't see me right now, I'm looking. Every time I stop drawing, my head is turning towards the still life, and I'm observing. As you can see, that green laser kind of wander around. Okay, moving over to the can. And again, remember, that line's inside there. It's foggy now, but going to go ahead and just make that as thin as I can, and then add some more material. And what you'll tend to start doing is moving back and forth from the steps pretty naturally, almost instinctually. You know, you'll know where to add, you know where to take away, and again, remember, always step back few 2 or 3 steps, and you know, take a good long look to make sure things are correct. What I can see at this point is, you know, the can is too long. It should be a little bit more shorter here, and if I did a relationship line from this point on my still life, yeah, I can see. So I'm going to go ahead and add another relationship line so I can start to guide it or measure it with the horizontal cylinder. Okay, go back in here, begin to make sure I get enough material so I can find that perfect curve. Another thing I'm doing is, you know, I'm adding even more relationship lines. Like on the still life, I'm looking from this part of the bottle, and if I have a line going straight through that side of the can, at what point would it cross? I'm going to erase that later, but that helps me make sure that this corner here is accurately placed within that corner. So as you're going to go along, you're going to add more geometry. And so you can imagine the geometry you would add for, you know, a still life that's, you know, full of 20 objects. And remember, everybody, I mean, this is just a minimum that you can do, or that I'm demoing. Looking at some of your last projects, I can see that some of you have a lot of native ability, and that native ability should be tested. So put more than 4 objects. By all means, challenge yourself, and that's how you get better. As you can see, I'm moving on into more defining the edge of that cube, that milk carton. Okay, adding material. Okay, I'm going to step back, and I can see that the can here seems a little short, so I'm going to elongate that, because this line here, if you look at the still life, right, that's a little bit, that gap should not be there from my perspective. There we go, and I'm going to get the, remember, draw that oval transparent, draw it through the form, because you'll find that edge. So clean that edge up. I'll deal with that later. Now, add a little bit more charcoal there. There we go. Now that corner is lining up nicely. From my perspective, if I look at the still life, the corner of that milk carton lands right there, a good inch or so above the bottom of that can. All right, we'll go over here and edit that edge. A little bit more complex drawing this time, so do your best, take your time, do more than one. Again, you can always personalize it with the different type of objects that you're going to use. There we go. See, a little more detail there on that top corner. Let it flow naturally. And keep your focus, even though, you know, I do suggest taking breaks, you know, stepping back and looking at it. If you have a flow started, if you have a certain amount of energy that's guiding you, you know, stick with it. You know, check your phone later. You know, sometimes you have to seize on the opportunity. There we go. All right, that seems to be coming together nicely. I'm really liking that. And I'm also liking the sketchiness again. You know, over here we got some more things to do. I'm going to go ahead and, okay, define that top of that cube a little bit more. Add some material. Remember, parallel, parallel. Even though those curves to that bottle there, simplify it first. Then you can do all the detail work later on. Okay, up here. Simplify that cylinder first. Then you can go back in there and get all that good stuff. And sometimes I really enjoy drawing like really complex things like caps. Cars are always a great thing to, or still life to draw, because they're full of geometry, full of you know, interesting line quality. Because all those car designers, you know, they probably draw. Well, they do draw. I'm sure of it. And they look at a lot of fine art to get inspiration and also innovation. Because remember, in the studio, in the quietness of the studio, in your own space, or even if it's just your own personal headspace, that's where the innovation comes from. And it's because innovation comes from the observance of the everyday needs of the people. And the ways that we can make the world better, visually, functionally. You know, if you're designing a interesting shoe, you're probably going to have to sketch it out or bring that image out into the physical world to show people, this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I'm talking about. And that's what drawing really does. It's the rawest way and the fastest way and the most immediate way to record those ideas. And from those small ideas, then you can focus and concentrate on what you can do with them. But first, you need to know the formula of form and shape and color and texture. All these things that the human body and or the human for thousands of years have survived with. You know, the senses. And artists really, you know, study that in their work. What the human is attracted to, what the human observes, and how can I work with that observation. Okay, And step back. Got some work to do to that can over here, but I'm going to move forward again, dispersing the energy around. Because we're all full of wonderful ideas. Every one of us has a great idea. You know, all those thoughts that we all have every single day, all our lives. You know, at some point there's something that we should investigate. You know, there's always something that we have thought about, and we've all had the feeling that, yeah, that's a good idea. You know, I should try that, or I would want to try that. Well, think of drawing as a way to immediately record that idea. Whether it's a design for a type of clothing or design for a tool, drawing is going to give you that ability to immediately record it, and record it to a point where the viewer, because you know all our ideas want to be shared, right? So that ability to know the formulas of form and shape allows the viewer to see those ideas that were once dormant or inside the subconscious. So we provide form to your ideas. So we can show people and go, look, this is what I'm thinking about. This is my idea. Now, it doesn't necessarily always have to be, I think, with drawing and art. Form is also with music and literature and dance and certain types of businesses and creative industries. Okay. What I like to do with my kneaded eraser, when I really start to define things, I like to roll it into a nice orb, you know, like a marble, you know, and kind of pinch an edge. So get it nice and round first, so then you have a nice, and then I make some dimples in it, so I can have a good way to pinch it. So an orb, and then kind of thin it out, and that's the way that I like to shape it when I'm trying to do some more finer work. Keep that as sharp as you can. And like I always say, it's more about your experience. It's more about whether you're feeling good while you're drawing, and that's what's more important, because just the sheer aspect of you trying is going to make an interesting drawing. Okay. And what I really enjoy about still life drawing is and when you make a drawing that's a good size, 18 by 24, in my opinion, is a minimal size for a good charcoal drawing is the negative spacing that happens. Try to make the viewer want to walk through this canyon-like negative space. And that helps with composition, of course, is always being conscious of the empty space. It's almost like the saying that silence is language. So is negative space. It says something. Where you place emptiness. Again, I'm still just simplifying this. Breathe down. Again, I'm looking at a 1/4 inch in front of my Okay, I'm going to try to get this background here. And as you can see, my my oval, first gesture oval, was way off. I mean, I had so much space in between there. When I looked at my still life, it's pretty close, and even closer. So let me fix that right now. As you can see, the still life, I have a lot less space there. It's basically on the edge of that. There we go. That makes more sense. And that also, believe it or not, since I've compressed that space there, it allows a more of a foreshortened depth to the back of that oval form, or the table platform. And it's because that oval has been tilted back into three-dimensional space. And there's a lot of theory about the spatial play that the artist in the drawing has, or even the just the sculptor in general, is the dimensions that we can play with. You have the dimensions of the still life, which is 3-dimension, and transferring that into a 2-dimensional flat plane. But then that 2-dimensional flat plane becomes a window that a viewer, somebody with a brain, looks at, and then it goes into this other dimension, almost like a psychic dimension, and it wanders around inside that dimension because the viewer would be thinking about it, looking at it, and you never know what happens in that, in that space, or what happens, or what the viewer thinks about in that space. So I like to think of drawings like that. Okay, go back in here and see if I can get a better edge. Remember, try it with some speed, swift motion. Go too slow. I'm just putting more material on there so that I can get my gummy eraser and begin to thin that out. And you can't see how my body posture is right now, but I'm bending my knees, and I'm trying to be physical with the drawing. And I can continue to play with that curve and get it just right as I go along, but it sure fixed that error that I had. Okay. Alright, getting a little closer to where I like it. Again, you always want to, draw until you feel it's done. Whenever you feel it looks good, and that is when you step back and you just know. I'm not there yet, but it's coming along. I'm always amazed on, even though, buying charcoal is a pretty, unrefined drawing medium versus, all the mechanical pencils and of course, tablets and all the platforms that you can draw on with now. I've tried them, and I do some work with them, and for some avenues it makes sense to use a tablet and things like that, more for product design, when things are just, they have to be perfect. Although, attempting the perfection or that type of detail is always interesting to try, but when it comes to drawing and art, there's nothing like charcoal in how thin and detailed you can get it. Again, in a style or in a or approach, I would say, that is more akin to nature rather than mechanics and well, I guess the control of nature. I guess that's what that would opinion be. And we can see that with a lot of different cultural kind of artwork versus, well, for instance, westernized art historical works, the Renaissance, the Greek, beautiful figures, the realism, and versus the same time you had the Inca and the Mayan doing their thing on the other side of the world. And when we were doing our thing on this side of the world, we were building the same architectural, type of structures with, the same type of complexities. So a lot of that imagery and the difference, or the differences between them, the fact that westernized work is always was a lot more, realistic versus the Mayan, the Inca. Well, it's more related to how they view the tool of art. Not much about talent or ability. It's more about how that specific culture and that geography or that geographic location, how they viewed how to use artwork and what forms and ways of depicting nature and themselves worked for them. We see the same thing in Eastern culture with the lack of a lot of detail and the musculature of the Renaissance and the Michelangelo kind of imagery, and of course the feats of Da Vinci. But the Buddhist sculptures and that type of imagery was minimal. Well, if you think about their belief system, it's more what happens in the subconscious mind versus the real world. So that makes sense to them. But believe you me, with a skilled or as skilled as what was happening in Europe at the time, moving over here to the milk carton, and again continuing on. So you see how when you have more objects the steps just, they just get stretched out a little bit, meaning that you take a little more time. I'm still in a defining the edge mode, carving, getting it just right. And remember, do not forget to keep looking at your still life or at what you are trying to draw. Breathe and down. All the way. There you go. I was excited about that corner. Alright. Okay, over here. I like it when I actually crush a little bit of the charcoal, because that means the next mark is going to be nice and sharp because of that break. So I take advantage of that opportunity. Alright. And always remember, we are trying to do an impression of life. And that's why, still life work is interesting with, or learning still life drawing, or drawing in general, is, it's always good to use, the most basic shapes that you have around your environment. Because if you could make basic objects, like what we're doing here, interesting and that means you can make anything interesting. So imagine when you do go out to the sunset at the beach, or somewhere in the forest where it's amazingly interesting already. Well, imagine what happens when you draw that. See how I've switched up a little bit there? This can I got some work to do. And I think when I hit the ghost line, I'll be able to have a little bit more control with that charcoal pencil. And really, when it starts to not feel good, when a certain part of a shape gets, when you start to get frustrated with it, well, that's when you have to look at it and go, well, is it supposed to be that way? Is that the way? But there's a difference between that and not attempting. So, only you know what you're truly doing. So and only you know if you've truly tried as hard as you could have. But most of the time your instincts will be correct. They will guide you, they will guide the way. Okay. All right. Defined edge. Next is the ghost line. Now remember, at any moment you could pause, add some more charcoal, step step back to, you know, maybe the erasing, carving, you know, whatever you need to do. And remember, even it's same as your buying charcoal, you want to turn as you are doing your ghost line. Every time you do a line, turn that charcoal pencil a good 180 degrees and continue on, just so you can continue on with that sharpness or variety of line. Oop. Just like so. Got a little off track there. Just clean that up first. There we go. Sometimes we get off track, and then all we have to do is get right back on, because the track is still there. Okay, there we go. Feeling pretty good about it now. Alright, cap is good enough for me for your linear step. Okay, moving on to the can. Remember to move swiftly, well, not too swiftly, but more of a medium pace. And that should get you flowing nicely. And that's where that gesture drawing comes from, you know, or the skill comes from the practicing of the gesture. You could imagine the Chinese calligraphist or the Chinese ink drawings, you know, somebody would go up there to the top of that peak to spend all day hiking up that mountain and that peak just to do probably a few marks on a nice sheet of paper with some ink to capture the perfection with the simplicity and the movement. But imagine that, doing all that all day long just to draw for moments. There we go. Ghost line's finished. And now let's go ahead and do the erase away drawing. I'm gonna lightly just brush over. And you know, even handling your erase away part, which is the very last step, you know, even handling that in a uniform direction like a cross hatching can give you some interesting effects that maybe later on with another idea you can get some wind like movement, or you know, like I said before, drawing is all about tricks. You know, how do you do these kind of interesting visual tricks with swift movements and knowing what the material or the medium can do. If you know how ink drips and how it washes and how it soaks into different types of materials, well, you can utilize those tricks for different effects. Like for instance, it's right now the fact that I am going in a, you know, a uniform direction with that erase away. I mean, you can see some interesting effects happening here. Well, that moves us into creative drawing. Just like so. And I like to keep things like that just because I like the way it looks. And that is the most important part of this process, is you as an individual liking what you do and what you have accomplished. Because no matter what it looks like, you know, you give me a solid hour on this, or maybe two, it will be a piece of art that nobody can say otherwise. All right. Do not forget to put your name and date in this interesting, powerful year of 2020. Okay, well, here is the finished drawing, or the finished linear drawing. As you can see, I've done my best to try to get within, reason, proper scale and proportion. I'm acknowledging the negative space that's happening. This can leaning to this side, gives the composition some sort of a directional implied line to this area here. And even with these mundane, real simple objects, there's always some sort of a narrative that happens when you do a drawing like this. This could be for individuals, three types of people, and that's not unlike how you would rough draft together a storyboard for cinema, or for any type of composition or a painting that has a narrative of people doing things. So as you can see, we have these three figures standing over, a figure that's on the ground, laying on their back or on their side, and that's what happens with art, right? And it's because, you've done this in a archival material. People recognize charcoal on paper as art, so therefore they're going to think about it as art. They're going to try to figure out why am I looking at this? Why is this on the wall? And that's a different reaction than if someone were to see this image on the screen or on a monitor of some sort. The tactileness of it, the fact that it is material, and what we know about art history, everybody knows that it's art. So the narrative begins. And what could be happening with this organization, or with your organization of objects that you put together? What could this be a metaphor of? We have, two smaller forms or individuals and two larger forms individuals. We have the composition aiming towards this space over here. You have the largest form here, or the largest individual, facing the direction of pushing these two smaller forms out. And all that can create narrative. These could be two bullies trying to do something to these small individuals, or these could be individuals helping out somebody on the ground. So, the narrative just begins. And that's what's great about art. The narrative will continue to manifest. And it's because you've attempted to make a good drawing. Let's zoom in a little bit and just kind of see what's happening. And you can see I'm not completely accurate with what's going on. And that's not what's important. There's no real need to learn how to draw, in my opinion, like a machine. And again, we're drawing things that are objects, that are in real space. That's different from drawing from a photograph, or drawing from an already rendered piece of art, because the artist has already figured out all the problems for you. So figure it out for yourself. Don't draw, or try not to draw already drawn work. Draw objects in your environment, and that gives it an amount of truth, and that goes a long way. It's truth. Okay, thank you.